Welcome back to the Green Lectionary Podcast, a conversation on Scripture through the lens of creation justice. My name is Derek Weston, and today we will be looking at a text for the fourth week of Advent. Today, my guests are Reverend Jonah Overton and our returning guest, Reverend Josh Scott. Jonah is a pastor and community organizer. They're the pastor of Zao MKE Church, a 9-year-old inclusive congregation in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Josh Scott is the pastor of Grace Point Church in Nashville, Tennessee, and author of several books, including the recently released Cross-Examined, Reading the Bible in Times of Division. Before we continue, a quick word from Creation Justice Ministries. Winter and Advent are seasons of stirring up strength. Even as the earth grows still, life below the surface is preparing for renewal. Far from dying, creation is quietly gathering strength for what's next. Advent invites us to do the same, to wait, to hope, and to stir up strength from our deepest and quietest places so that we are prepared for the light of Christ to break into the world. Creation Justice Ministries is stirring up strength through gathering and public witness, training and forming faith leaders, bringing creation justice into church life, and supporting church resilience and restoration projects. Will you stir up your strength once more with a special year-end gift? Your donations received by December 31st will be matched dollar for dollar by a generous donor, doubling your impact for creation justice. Join us in stirring up our strength for the work that lies ahead. And join us now in looking at Matthew chapter 1 through the lens of creation justice. Jonah and Josh, welcome to the Green Lectionary. Josh, welcome back, and Jonah, welcome for the first time.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be invited.
So good to be back.
Um, so good to have you both. Jonah, because you're new, could you tell us a little bit about your ministry context? Tell folks a little bit about where you serve.
Yeah, I am a United Methodist Church planter, pastoring a community I founded in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Um, we're kind of cuspy on even being called a church plant. We're about 9 years in,
Mm.
but we have this sort of experimental edge that I think makes it feel, especially, we were not quite 4 years old when COVID shut everything down, and so we had to kind of replant through that. And then when we opened back up, we replanted through that, and we have actually one of the central interpretations of our own theology. Our shorthand now is compost theology. That it's our interpretation of the resurrection, truly, that like we actually have to go through death to find
Mm.
life on the other side. And that's shown up in our community as well. That, there are seasons I feel really lucky to live in a part of the world that has four distinct seasons. If springtime and fall in Milwaukee are woefully short, but there are four seasons, and so we have the season of letting go and composting and rebirthing into something new. And so we've been a really experimental community for a long time. Um, and the through line for us is that we are Jesus rooted, justice centered, and radically inclusive. And so that identity, along with our name, Zao, we are Zao MKE Church, and Zao is a Greek word that means to be among the living. And so we seek after the fullness of life, um, and we seek after that in an eternity that includes the present. And so that has taken us in a lot of different directions. But that's who we are.
I love that. I love that. And
Well, Jonah, can I say this? If you live near Nashville, you could have all four seasons in the same week.
Hey, all right,
Always fun.
Zao.
Always fun.
What's the shorthand? Do you have like a we always said that by calling it Zao MKE, it meant that we were gonna show up in all sorts of other cities. So what's our Nashville shorthand? Do you guys have any cute little
Um, BNA is the airport.
that I mean that's how we ended up with MKE. That's the airport.
Yeah.
But I don't know if Zao BNA is gonna have the same ring to it. We'll see.
I love
Anyway,
that.
Zao Nashville, here we come.
I love it. And I think that our listeners will definitely get the idea of compost theology, and I think there's a lot of folks in our circle and our network who resonate with that idea. Um, and then Josh, I think you've written like 6 books since the last time we've talked. But but I don't think we've spoken since Cross-Examined came out. So would you tell folks a little bit about Cross-Examined?
Yeah, so my most recent book, and it explores several key. I always feel weird using the word issues because it's way bigger than issues, right? But these central conversations around things like white Christian nationalism, racism, gender equality, those sorts of things, LGBTQ plus inclusion, and so it's a short book. It's a small book, like it's and you wrote a very lovely blurb for it, which I'm so grateful for. I can tell you that the publisher was so happy with this the way it's gone that we're actually gonna not next year, but the next year expand that into a bigger book that has a leader guide and video content and all of that. So there's sort of a
Awesome.
cross-examine 2.0 coming in the future. But yeah, it's been out in the world since April, I think. I
That sounds
think
right. That sounds right. And
ish.
I met every word of the blurb that I wrote. It's a great, it's a fast read, but it's so important that I think part of what you do is you expand the quote unquote issues to help people see the human beings who are behind those issues, so that it's not just about an issue. It's about our
Yeah,
brothers, our sisters, our neighbors in some real tangible ways.
yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So let's jump into our passage for Fourth Advent. This is a passage people know. This is Matthew chapter 1, verses 18 to 25. Now the birth of Jesus the Messiah took place in this way. When his mother Mary had been engaged to Joseph, but before they lived together, she was found to be pregnant from the Holy Spirit. Her husband Joseph, being a righteous man and unwilling to expose her to public disgrace, planned to divorce her quietly. But just when he had resolved to do this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife, for the child conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will bear a son, and you are to name him Jesus, for he will save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what had been spoken by the Lord through the prophet. Look, the virgin shall become pregnant and give birth to a son, and they shall name him Emmanuel, which means God is with us. When Joseph awoke from sleep, he did as the angel of the Lord commanded him. He took her as his wife, but had no marital relations with her until she had borne a son, and he named him Jesus. So, Jonah and Josh, where is creation in this passage?
Honestly, when I read through it, and I didn't see it until you were reading just now. But it just occurred to me that we often think of angels as basically human beings with magic. Um, but if we think of creation, and I know you include humanity in creation, but if we're also trying to expand our imagination to include essentially all parts of non-human creation, they're like angels,
Mm,
are a part of that also. And however you interpret this text, whatever that angel means to you, or like how Joseph received that divine communication, considering that angels might be sort of a non-human part of creation, brings me to other religious traditions and mythologies where messengers are often like, I don't know, I'm gonna go out on an uninformed limb here and say majority of the time, at least, if not nearly all the time, messengers are animals.
mm, mhm,
So like if Coyote is coming to you in a dream, our tradition might call that angel,
mm,
but um but other traditions name those messengers as animals that are recognizable to us, sort of in the world, in the physical creation around us. And we have no idea what angels are or are like, except to the degree that we personally have encountered something that we would call angel, because scripture describes them either very little or like in these ways that are difficult to grasp.
mm.
Um, you know, just like way too many eyes, balls of flame, the rings of
No wonder people freak
Saturn,
out, right? Like, no,
the
people are like, well, of course, you show up like that.
exactly, exactly. So they're definitely like creatures in the way that we would think about it. Um, so yeah, I just like had this image of like angel messenger, like the coyote, the messenger, the
Mm,
way that human beings interact with the divine is almost always mediated through, if nothing else, our the imagery that we have with um with non-human animals.
mhm.
Mhm.
And so
I
there
love
is
that.
something a little closer to the rest of creation in that for me.
Yeah, I love that. I love that idea.
So there are two things that pop up for me contextually. One is that this story in Matthew 1 is actually borrowed from a midrash story of Moses. And so, if you were to go back and read the story of the Exodus, where Moses is born, what you'll find out is that there was a tradition that developed because when we meet the book of Exodus at the beginning, there's a Pharaoh who decides he doesn't know Joseph, and he decides to enslave the Hebrews because they're becoming more abundant than the Egyptians, and they decide this is dangerous for us, so we're going to enslave them. And so, one of the things that Pharaoh decides to do is he has this dream and when he has this dream, he asks his interpreters to come. He tells them the dream, and essentially what they say is, uh, one of the Hebrews, one of the Hebrews is going to become greater than you and lead these people away.
Mm,
And so that's when Pharaoh decides we're going to kill all the babies two and under, right? So the entire Matthew nativity story is a retelling of this Mosaic midrash, which is connecting Jesus to Moses. But this idea of he will save the people, he will liberate the people, um, I think for me, when I think about creation, specifically what we're dealing with in our era with climate change, um, that is a human. I mean, no, yeah, climate shifts over eons, whatever. But what we're experiencing, climate change, is a humanly created and generated problem. And that's how the New Testament seems to understand Jesus. Like when you go to Paul and he says, in the first Adam all die, in the second Adam all are made alive. There's sort of this we have a humanly created problem in the world. And in this context, it's what we're doing to the environment, to the creation we were given to steward and care for. That means the solution is going to have to be a human solution
mm,
because we are part of creation. And I think that we have so bought into our own press about how great we are as a species, and I think we're terrific. But I think God loves the rest of creation too. And so we have to begin to see ourselves not as sort of separate from creation or above creation, but we have to see ourselves as belonging to creation, that we are part of this ecosystem of life and humanity. And there's something about the Jesus story, specifically how he will save his people from their sins, um, that to me calls us back to seeing our place within the whole. It's what Mary Oliver talked about in her poem Wild Geese, where she says you take your place in the family of things.
mm.
And so I think for me, just there's some breadcrumbs here that are calling us to realize and step into our role as collaborators and co-creators with God, yes, but also stewards and as uh, part of, not separate from, not against, not above, but belonging to the entire created order.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. I love thinking of Jesus as the human solution to the human-made problem of sin, and Jesus is the human solution to the human-made problem of climate change. Uh,
Yeah.
that's kind of a beautiful image. I think one of the things that, I mean, this passage is kind of known for the fact that it's a subversion of creation, right? That like Mary gets pregnant in a way that is not the way things get pregnant in creation. Um, and that's kind of the whole of this story. And in some ways, it's one of the problems I have with this text. And like I'm gonna go out on the limb and say I have a problem with part of this text. Um, which is it makes Jesus a little bit not part of creation by
Mm.
having him conceived in this way that feels like it subverts creation. And it's God intervening in creation in these ways that really, I guess, kind of right now and thinking about our climate changed world really unsettles me because I feel like sometimes we're waiting for God to intervene in creation in this kind of way to solve the problem. Does that make sense at all? It,
It does. It does. And I think particularly with birth, I think there's an aspect to which we're waiting for God to intervene and kind of magic us through this. There's another way in which we're trying to develop technology that allows us to manipulate creation beyond. And what I mean, like technology is great, and I'm not trying to like say that um, we shouldn't explore things, but I I've given birth twice now. Advent is really different for me,
Mhm.
having been pregnant twice and given birth twice. And one of the texts that has always resonated with me, but resonates, I'm just going to say a lot more deeply and a little bit differently, is the idea of God groaning with the birth pangs
Mm,
of creation,
mhm,
that God births things into being, and that birthing something new costs something.
mm,
Um, there there is no routine part of life so close to death as giving birth.
mm,
Um, and this is, sort of a deeper story about my experience birthing people, but like you come close to the veil,
mhm,
um, and you're with your body bringing someone into the life side of the veil between life and death. And when God, I think that I have all these questions about it, like why is this so painful? Why is this so taxing? Why is it so demanding? Why does it require so much blood? It's literally the only thing that has made me even like remotely consider any merit to penal substitutionary atonement is just sort of like the payment of blood seems to make no sense for me, except when I think about literally how much blood bringing my daughters cost me, in
mm,
bringing them into this
Mm.
world cost me. That like there is something that is beyond my understanding about what it costs to bring new life into the world. Um, and when so my youngest is only 3 months old, so some of this is pretty fresh. Um, and I don't know if it was right before I gave birth or right after, but I saw some news coming out that they have created an artificial, like they're calling it like an artificial womb.
mm,
Um, Now, I'm all about assistive reproductive technology. I'm a queer person, reproducing in queer family, and so like IVF is has been essential to my participation in bringing new life into the world. So I don't want to limit our imagination on how we can interact with the act of creation. But I also know how intimate it is for a person to grow inside your body,
mm,
and the feeling that I had thinking about a person growing inside of a machine was of a fear I have of disconnection. That sounds
mm,
very empty. That machine would be hollow, and I wonder what that costs us.
mm,
I think engaging with birth is also, if we're doing it in a way that really acknowledges what birth is engaging with death, is engaging with loss, is engaging with the messiness of bodies. And there have been a lot of really brilliant feminist theologians who have pointed out that patriarchy loves an abstraction, loves to get away from bodies, loves to get away from the earth, because it is messy. That patriarchy conceives of bodies and blood and the earth all as feminine things that need to be sort of conquered,
mhm,
controlled, fought against, rather than gifts to surrender to, because there's no, yeah. So Anyway, all this to say that when we look back at the developments of our own mythic storytelling, we see that Isaiah was originally writing, like in the Hebrew of Isaiah, um, the word used does not mean virgin, it means young woman.
Hmm.
But when it was translated into Greek and the Septuagint became a common text, that word was more commonly understood to be virgin, as in, right? Like no, not having sex before, not belonging to a man, not whatever. And I'm really curious the way that shift in the telling of Isaiah has shaped the telling, retelling, and writing down of this story in Matthew, which is not to say that I deny the um, powerful and maybe even supernatural influence of God in this moment, but that it's a lot cleaner, it's a lot less costly to imagine a world wherein God just sort of zaps baby Jesus into Mary. And the people who have speculated on how Mary became pregnant, other than that through that process, have speculated that it might have cost her something. That there may not have been, that there may be some ugly or violent histories there that, how did she become pregnant outside of this marriage? What's clear is that God blesses her and blesses Jesus and encourages Joseph not to abandon her. It's a much cleaner story to say that God, waved a wand than to say that something else happened that maybe made Mary extremely vulnerable, that maybe harmed her deeply, and that God chooses to create even out of bloodshed or violence or harm.
Yeah.
I think what we know now about how people are made, and that they didn't know. I mean, in Matthew's time, uh, the feminine was seen as an incubator of male life. So I heard Brian McLaren's, I think I read it in one of his books. Maybe it was We Make the Road by Walking, where he says, what might it mean that when God wanted to bring God's son into the world, they had to cut out the men, the
Mm.
source of human violence, the source of, I'm going to use the word ambition. There's good ambition, and then there's ambition that tears the world apart. That kind of ambition. And I think that's interesting to think about that, because we know now that uh, to have to carry a child, you're giving that child DNA. So if you're like trying to subvert some doctrine of original sin, we know that like that can't be what's actually going on here, because at least for us, we know that that's not the case. But I think there's something interesting to say that Jesus represents God and humanity coming together to solve the problem that
Mm.
humans have created. So it's a human problem. Humans have to be a part of the solution. And yet it's also God somehow joining alongside and collaborating with human beings to bring about a deliverer, a liberator, someone who comes to bear the message of God's kingdom, somebody who shows up in the world to say, what if? What if everybody shared their food and nobody was hungry? Right? What if we went around caring for each other and caring for the needs of others? What would that world be like? So I think there's this interesting sort of uh, we have a tendency, the Christianity I grew up with has a tendency to say we're just going to sit back and wait for God to do it. I would call that the John the Baptist vision of the world, right? John's message is sort of God's going to come clean this up, just get ready. And then that doesn't go that way. And then Jesus shows up, and Jesus has a different vision of God. Jesus, or the kingdom, is a collaborative vision. God may be a part of this, but God without us is not going to do anything. That God is looking for humans, which I don't like the blending together of the Christmas stories, because they're very different. It flattens it out. But there's this powerful moment in Luke where the angel comes to Mary and gives her like, here's what's going to happen, and Mary has to consent to the project.
Mm.
She says, let it be exactly as you said. There's this divine and human connection. And Jonah, I love something you were talking about the messiness. I think what the fact that a human is involved in this is sort of God not avoiding or bypassing the messiness of becoming human.
Mm,
And I think the way we cast Jesus so often in Christianity, it's hard to find a human in there.
Mm.
yeah.
You know, we're so afraid of losing his divinity that we completely erase his humanity. I think what makes it powerful is that God doesn't send a demigod into the world. Now, so I think some Christian theology has turned Jesus into that, but I don't think that's actually the facts of the situation. But God and God doesn't necessarily roll up God's sleeves and say, "Get out of the way, I'll take care of this." But that God looks for a union of the divine and human. And that's how God enters the world. And that's how God begins this project of renewal and restoration and transformation. It's God coming into the messiness with humanity, not as sort of not a Docetism sort of like looks sort of human, but he walks on water. So, but this real human being who's in collaboration with God. So there's something beautiful about that, and I really believe that's true. I do not think rescue is coming without us as a species.
Mm.
I think whatever God will do, God will first of all not bypass our willingness to be involved. And I think if we end up saying as a species, we want to watch the world burn, God with a grieved heart allows that to happen. But I think God also is continually inviting us, calling us, challenging us to become part of the solution and not part of the problem.
Mm. Yeah, so many good things that you both have said, and I'm just soaking it all in. We've already gotten into this, but how do we see humanity interacting with creation here? Recognizing that there's the part of creation that is also humanity. There's the part of creation that is this angel, and there's the part of creation that is um, subjected to the problem for which Jesus is the answer. So how is humanity interacting with creation in this passage?
Well, it's interesting, Josh. When I was listening to you talk about sort of your take on patriarchy and subverting patrilineal identification and all of that. Um, I know I'm like super late to the party, but I'm finally watching Game of Thrones,
I
and
never have. So you arrived ahead of me.
you gotta get on board
Good Lord,
sometime. And I
people.
resisted this long. Yeah. So I'm finally watching Game of Thrones, and there's like the bastards are like a really big part of the plot. Just that like there are these houses. These houses are um it's our patrilineal, and all of it has to happen within these existing structures where power is exchanged along hereditary lines, but only within the proper channels, right? So you end up with these bastards who are like low key affiliated with their houses of origin, of like genetic origin, but they're just disqualified from receiving and embodying power because they weren't born correctly within the mechanisms of those power structures. And it makes me think about how Jesus properly understood in a patrilineal society is a bastard,
Mm.
right? Like it, and what it means for God to show up, as you mentioned, Josh, in humanity, with humanity, right? Like this is not, I think that one of the most important contrasts between um our God and some of the ways that we talk about our God is that like we talk about Jesus sometimes as though he's Athena, just like bursting fully formed from the forehead of Zeus, when in
Mhm.
fact, like that's super not what happened. Like it's actually really critical to our tradition to understand that Jesus was gestated, that Jesus was born. And again, to get into like the actual messiness of it, Jesus was born through a human birth canal covered in blood, and probably not too long after some non-zero amount of animal shit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
Jesus was like really in it physically and was a bastard, therefore was outside of the human constructions of legitimate power. I mean, layer it onto the reasons why, right? Like there's 1,000 reasons that Jesus is disqualified from this. But in this passage, we have a particular understanding that like Jesus is connected to creation. Jesus is in a body. Jesus is very physically embodied. Jesus is with humanity and women and the animals and not like decidedly not with human constructions of legitimate power, which is always power over the rest of creation and not with.
Hmm.
So it really
Uh,
aligns Jesus with creation here
Mm.
against the human structures that are antagonistic towards creation.
Jonah, I love that you bring this up because I think that's exactly what Matthew's doing in the genealogy, which um, John Shelby Spong said some people think it's the 17 most boring verses in the New Testament, but they're actually quite interesting because the five women are named, Mary being one of them, but four of them, and all of them um, have all sorts of reasons. First of all, you didn't name women in genealogies in the ancient world. It was all about who the father was. But here we get four women named. All of them are somehow sexually compromised. All of them have some sort of pall hanging over them in their story. And Matthew uses their stories to sort of say about Jesus, God has, if it hadn't been for Ruth, we would have never have had David. If it hadn't been, it's right, there's this idea that God somehow is working through these stories that we look at and say they're imperfect, they're improper, they are questionable. And what Matthew's saying is, no, God has always worked through those kinds of stories. And it's, Jesus and Mark and Matthew also, Matthew makes some changes to this, but it's still close, but calls Jesus the son of Mary.
Mm.
The only reason you call somebody the son of Mary is because you don't know who the father is in the ancient
Hmm.
world. In the Gospel of John, Jesus interacts with the religious leaders and talks to them about being children of Abraham. And they say to him, "We know who our father is." I mean, Jesus, I do wonder if that's not the question of paternity, if that doesn't hang over his entire life,
Mm-hmm.
like as sort of an accusation. I mean, the fact that you have in this, very quickly as the Christian or the Christians in an anachronistic way of saying it, but those Jesus followers, you have people saying, is your guy, is he really on the up and up? Is he really legit? Because we heard rumors about him." And it's through the person who you would look at, in the ancient world, they would look at them and say, your very origins knock you out of being in contention for anything special or anything divine or anything. And yet it is through the messiness of humanity, through an actual birth into the world, which especially now, but especially in the ancient world, is a dangerous process,
Mm-hmm.
both for the one giving birth and the one being born. It's precarious that God enters the world not from a forehead, but through actual human, that God does not subvert or bypass humanity, but enters deeply into it. And I think it's just absolutely profound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So, in light of all of the things that we've said, and in light of thinking about issues of creation justice, um, and in light of people preaching this passage from for Advent 4, um, where is there a call to action for the church for from this passage?
I mean, we have some pretty explicit instructions here, and like they're framed as being for Joseph, right? But it's not often that we have like explicit instructions from a messenger of the divine in a narrative like this. Um, and and though the text itself is particular to Joseph, I think what we see is God saying, do not abandon creation.
Mm.
Do not abandon what is messy, what is outside the imagination of the limits you want to put on creation. I am bringing literal new life into this world. It is blessed and holy. It is where your hope comes from. You are being asked by every structure in your culture to abandon it, and I'm asking you not to.
Mm.
To be with me is to be with this new life, which is again close to death, which brings you out of sync with the structures of human power that want to subdue it or subjugate it. Um, but I'm asking you not to abandon it.
Mm.
Yes, I love that. And I would also say there is an invitation to go more deeply into our humanity because I think if we went more deeply into our humanity, I mean, the way we've sort of been taught to function under capitalism, with sort of the idea that creation is just exists for us to take from. Our ancestors did not see it that way. They understood that their very lives were dependent. We're in the era of processed foods. They understood that their very lives were contingent upon the abundance of creation. And so that's why in the Jewish tradition, you have commands about, hey, every 7 years, give the field a break, right? Care for creation, and creation will care for you. So I think the more we enter into our humanity, the more we see humanity as a gift of God. We get to be human. But that being human does not mean we're outside of creation or apart from creation. It means we have a special responsibility within creation. The more we lean into that responsibility, the more human we become, and the more we stop seeing creation as something to just be used for our capitalistic advancement, but it is a gift to be enjoyed, honored, and stewarded well. And so I think that deepening our appreciation of our humanity actually is good for creation and it's good for us.
Mm. I love that. And I think there's something so beautiful. Um, for me, there's just something like the hallmark in some ways of my creation justice theology is the incarnation. And there's something so beautiful about God taking on flesh. And I think what I'm hearing from both of you is like God takes on flesh. Let's not sanitize that.
Mhm.
Like God is enfleshed in this world. Let's leave that as the messy thing that it is. Let's leave that as the blood covered, shit strewn, like maybe illegitimate, powerless thing that it is. Because that's God showing up in all of that. In the separation from power, in the messiness, in the bloodiness, in the very like bestial way that Jesus comes into the world. God is in the midst of that.
Yeah, I just got chills when you said that. That was really, I mean, that's it, right? This Paul gives us this whole image of what the world, what culture and empire look at as weakness is the power of God.
Mhm.
And a chapter later, after this text, King Herod flips his lid in fear over an illegitimate baby who, at least in Luke's story, was born among the feeding troughs of the animals. That there's something powerful and deeply threatening to systems of exploitation of this little tiny baby who's been born. Uh, what a great story, and
Mhm.
it still slaps in the 21st century.
It does. It does.
Yeah, I mean,
Uh,
and as far as like human beings being a part of creation, I think yeah, there. I can't quite communicate, and I don't know if I'm alone in this experience or not, but like having children, giving birth to children, I have never felt more like the animal, like the mammal that I am. I mean, like literally, like so I'm chest feeding my youngest right now. Like I am not like in this moment, but like I I am I produce milk for her. My body is and you know what? It is not uncommon for me to feel like a dog lying on the sidewalk in a hot day as the litter just, is around. It is so bizarre to be an animal. It's so bizarre to have something growing inside of you. It is a wild experience to give birth. I am so grateful for modern medicine and technology. I mean, it's the primary reason that we have such a drastic reduction in infant and maternal mortality. Another reminder that I think is easier for us to forget, that birth and death are so close to one another. But I was lucky enough to be safe enough and to just sort of happen to have the physical resources and otherwise to be able to give birth outside of the hospital. Um, and I am like unmedicated. It's a super, super intense thing to do.
Okay.
Um, And like I think we're trying to find a better balance now. Some people are, but like it was only a couple generations ago that like pretty much that in this country, by routine, pregnant people were basically put into twilight, um, when giving birth, like totally knocked out, not present, not conscious, because the pain of giving birth is really overwhelming. And I cannot stress that enough. The pain of giving birth is really overwhelming. And for me, and no one is obligated to this by any stretch, but for me, being present to that pain also allowed me to be present to so much more when I was giving birth. It allowed me to be connected with the new life. It allowed me to be mobile. It allowed me to, whatever, all kinds of things. And I think that there is something there for humanity and understanding that, like, connection to creation. And there's a reason that the words that we have for the life that is around us and the ecosystems around us is like direct connection to the verb about, to create. Creation is what has been created, what is being created, what is in the process of creation. But the way that God creates is messy and it's painful and it's complicated and yeah, the invitation to be fully invested in creation opens us up to tremendous pain, potential for loss, danger.
Yeah.
Um, and I think in our attempt to create a kind of safety, we've dramatically overcorrected
Mm.
and dissociated entirely from God's birthing process that is continuous. We think of creation now as something that happened, which is wild. When you think about the life cycles of the things around us, like life and death is literally constant. Um, but we've insulated ourselves from that as much as we have been able to. And I think it is a spiritual imperative that we come closer to death, come closer to risk, come closer to danger, come closer to what we have deemed dirty, earthly, in order to come closer to life.
Mm. I have heard others who have given birth um, say that same thing, that they have never felt more like an animal than the process of giving birth and nursing children. And also just I always have so much more perspective on Advent when I talk to someone who has given birth. It is always a gift, because you help bring us back to the just very creatureliness of this story, which I think we really need. I think we really need a messy Christmas. I think we need a messy Advent, and I think we need a messy Christmas, especially this year.
Yep.
So, uh, thank you so much for that gift, Josh, Jonah, both of you. Thank you so much for all of the insight and wisdom. This has been such a rich conversation, and I appreciate you both so much.
Thanks for having
Indeed.
us.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for the Green Lectionary podcast. This episode was produced by Sprocket Wagner, and the music was provided by Christian McIver. Please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, and follow us on Instagram at green_lectionary. You can support this and other programs of Creation Justice Ministries at creationjustice.org/donate.
Our story comes alive within these pages, for every time and place throughout the ages. God speaks and is heard, and the enduring word calls us to care for our world as we share the love that can set creation free. Restoring the earth to wholeness, peace, and harmony. Let the songs of the water, land, and sky resound, 'cause together we're all bound. Within these pages, there's always new life to be found.